So Ryan, we've been talking about ReadyPDF and optimization and efficiency, but one of the questions people always ask about any new software tool, it doesn't matter what it's supposed to do, is, well, will this work in an automated workflow? And I think in the case of ReadyPDF, there are a lot of pointers to say that it could actually help your automated workflow become more efficient.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. I mean, the way I think about it is that when I think about a workflow architecture today, I want to, because it's as we go forward, there's fewer and fewer printers who are pure plays. And what I mean by that, there's fewer and fewer printers that just do transactional work or just do direct mail or just do general commercial work. And they have a whole host of technology now, printing technology and output methods to actually accomplish all this various work. So the way I think from an architecture point of view is that I want to take kind of best in class solutions that solve very specific workflow items and issues that increase my automation and efficiency at the same time. And I'm going to put those into a end-to-end automated workflow that can flex. And by flex, meaning that I can still use the same tool like a ReadyPDF for optimization, no matter what type of work I'm actually trying to produce for that client. So that's kind of how I think about it and how I would, kind of put ReadyPDF into the central part of a workflow.
Things we learned from the testing that the UK lab team did at KPI was that there were a lot of places where we saw improvements. There were file size improvements that speak to bandwidth and network efficiency, but there were also rip time efficiencies to be found, and that it was sort of interesting because it varied a lot. I mean, sometimes you got a little bit of benefit and sometimes you got a lot of benefit, but that benefit was there, and the time to the first page out could really be remarkably different when you ran an optimized file.
Yeah, I mean, basically, in one of the standard test files that we were using, it's basically a 5,000 page commercial invoice kind of document. So it had graphically rich elements on it. And of course, like I mentioned, the kind of equipment or the class of equipment, digital printers that we were using for the testing was kind of like mid-level production, cut sheet, EP type equipment, and some others. But basically with that type of file, so a sizable file, we saw in some cases up to a 27% improvement just in rip time. So that even, and to your point, it varied depending upon how much perceived benefit you receive. But think about it in this way. Even if you get 1 second improvement on the rip time, when you then extrapolate that by how many number of jobs, remember we talked about how the nature of how many jobs we're having to produce is changing. We saw a 62% increase in the average number of monthly jobs for print service providers between 2019 and 2021. And that means that on average, they were now producing over 6,000 jobs. Now, obviously COVID had a little bit of impact and dip on that, but it's been coming back. So you're still today producing more work than you probably were in 2018 at those levels. So any incremental improvement, whatever it is going to basically, it's like dropping a rock into a pond, right? It's the ripple effect. It's going to ripple out and have even more benefits because of just the sheer volume of work that you're producing. The other, the other benefit though is that not only just in savings of that rip time, because we said that in optimization is kind of a multi-pronged benefit here. One of the other areas was just in the sheer reduction of file size, and so how does that help in today's world? From my point of view, it helps obviously with any kind of transmission of the files, having to transfer it from one thing to the other, one place to the other. So whether that's transferring it back somehow to your client to do any kind of remote electronic proofing, you're going to save time there. Whether it's also increasingly how we have to go from kind of the ground at the print shop, the local network, in other words, up to the cloud and back in many cases, that's going to save cost and time on your transmissions. But also if you have to archive these things, because in many cases we do, it's going to also relate into increased cost savings there because it just doesn't take up as much space. And matter of fact, the testing kind of bared this out again. for a almost 3,100 page document that was a transactional statement, you'd think it's probably pretty optimized already because it didn't have a lot of graphically rich stuff, right? But this is where all that other kind of X object fonts, all this kind of things can add weight that we don't
And
see.
everything else. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what we found with even this file that you would think would be pretty optimized is that it was still able to reduce the file size by 85%. I mean, that's a big reduction.
Yeah. That's one of the things I always try to remind people about transaction files. No matter how plain they look, they often had an interesting experience as they were birthed and delivered into the world. And so they may have begun on a mainframe somewhere where they were generated by an SAP or an Oracle or some other type of high-end system. And that data got married to a template that got created sometime in the last 30 years by some product that may not even exist any longer. And maybe then it's gone through some document re-engineering and has had a number of other things done to it. And then the data got merged. But at the time it got merged, it was in one print stream format. And now it's going to be printed out to a PDF format. So it's got to go through a transform. And now we're ready to rip it and print it. And it's like, it picks up stuff every step of the way. And it's not just transaction, right? I mean, the same can be said for a lot of older offset print jobs that come over to digital, right? They might have been created with CS1 and just been modified a little bit, you know, for the last 20 years. So there's a lot of bloated PDF, I think, is maybe the best way of thinking of it. So there's a lot out there that's worthy of optimizing. It's a little bit scary.
That's true. I mean, it's really, like you say, to me, like in your first example there, it's really the data itself is pretty simple or optimized. It's everything that we've done to it over the years and all of its iterations that causes the bloat, so to speak. And then even for like on the commercial print side, absolutely. I mean, you know, I remember in production days, just because there was a newer file format out or a new version of the PDF format or whatever, it took the industry a long time to actually move up that notch because we're creatures of habit and we think that maybe it's going to break something because it's new. So we tend to, you know, use several versions back of what we could.
So the things that I took away from the white paper, and again, the white paper is available from Solimar. You can just let your Solimar team members know that you're interested in it, and they'll make it downloadable as well. But one of the things that I took away from it was that file optimization brings value to multiple points in the workflow, in the workflow story. So any level of optimization, whether you only got 1% optimization or you got 30% or you got 80% optimization, brings value to the table. And I thought that was an interesting conclusion because so often when we look at optimization and pre-flighting products, we talk about them as though it's the only thing you need and everything will be perfect. But it just is a helper in the overall optimization and efficiency story.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely how I view it. It's just an additional a piece of software that is really used as a tool in the overall workflow to make you better as a printer. And it makes you better because of the time it saves you in terms of maybe ripping, so you can have higher throughput on your equipment or maintain those rated speeds if you're using, you know, the latest and greatest kind of printing equipment. It makes you better because you can do things faster in terms of transmitting or transferring that kind of file, whatever we're talking about, either to the client or to the cloud, like we mentioned before. And it also, I think one thing, and this is something that we often overlook in the context of some other solutions too, but it creates more of a standardized approach to workflows, particularly on the upfront end, because you never quite know who or what has created that PDF file to begin with.
That's absolutely true. And there's no way you're going to go back to the designer and ask them to redesign to make things more efficient for you.
Highly unlikely.
Yeah, it's an unlikely scenario. You're exactly right. And that may be true even if the designers are in your own shop, right? I mean, they may be under turnover pressure as well. And they ask them to go back and, well, could you just tweak this a little bit to make this a little bit easier for us, downstream in the production is probably not really going to happen. So as you put your crystal ball in front of you or your Kreskin hat or whatever for a second, and as you look out over the next few years and you look at workflow optimization, what's the role of a ready PDF type product? Is this something that is really only going to be of interest to, say, a transaction company or a direct mailer, or do you see do you see it being of interest to a wider gamut of print providers?
I personally think that it's going to be applicable to the entire industry, no matter what type of print you're actually talking about. And it's for all the reasons that how the industry continues to evolve and put more pressure on the actual production of print. So it's the fact that we have to be more efficient. It's the fact that we can't have basically breaks or loops in our workflow and automation to where we have starts and stops. I mean, the vision that we have from an analyst perspective and from Keypoint's workflow service perspective is that by the end of this decade, we should really be getting towards semi to fully autonomous printing. And you're only going to be able to get that to be able to make these improvements now to increase that level of automation and efficiency. And the optimization aspect of that is a key point to be able to reach that end goal.
Yeah, because I guess no matter how good a composition engine or document generation engine you're working with or graphic generation engine you're working with, it's still never going to be as perfectly efficient as it could be and as perfectly optimized as it could be. It's always going to need a little bit of help to make
It's
it run
not
most efficiently.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Pat. I mean, it's not the role of a design tool or a composition tool. That's not their function. That's not the problem they're trying to solve from a software aspect. Is not optimization. So you have to bring in something else to be able to address that.
That's great. So I think what we've learned from the work that Keypoint Intelligence has done, both the lab team and with your insight and analysis on the white paper, is that the number of jobs is just going to keep on growing, and print shops need to be prepared for that. And those jobs might be small, they might be medium, they might be large. There's just going to be lots and lots and lots of them to keep track of. And if you can build optimization into your workflow environment, you will gain a significant amount of efficiency in getting those jobs to the designated press, whether it's a wide format device or a light production or a heavy production product.
I think that's a very good summary, and a quick shout out to David Sweetnam, who's on our testing lab kind of scenario for really putting this through its paces, so to speak, and getting some of this data back for us.
David was such immense help because especially just trying to figure out what kind of files to test, right?
Yeah.
And trying to make the right selection to really exercise the things that the equipment that he had available to him to test with. It was really brilliant. So Ryan, thanks so much again for the time, the effort, and the insight on all things PDF optimization.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure to be here and helping Solomar. And it's a topic, obviously, with PDF optimization that I can talk about any and every day.